GarageBand Creators Series interview here on Studio Live today. I'm talking to a creator who not only creates and records his own music, but also helps others do the same. Welcome to Studio Live today, Mr. John Kehl. How are you doing, John?
Hey, Pete. How are you? Thanks for having
I'm
me on.
Thank you so much. We've known each other for probably about 2 years now, and we've just the first time we've spoken is today, and it's a good opportunity to talk to you all about music and all about your creative process, which is what we do on this show. So, why don't you kick us off and tell us a little bit about the John Kehl story, a bit about your musical background would be great.
Yeah, absolutely, Pete. So first, I just want to say, thank you for having me. It's funny because we haven't spoken in person, but just from watching your videos, I feel like I know you. It's like the podcast effect. So my main day job is I'm a music teacher. I'm in the U.S. I teach band at some Illinois public schools. That's a 5th through 8th grade band program. So I start the kids when they're 10 years old, and I work with them up until they're 14 and see them off to high school, teaching kids how to play woodwind, brass, and percussion instruments. It's kind of living music in one way or the other. So that's what I've been doing for a number of years. I went to school for music. I'm a guitar player originally, and I've always been interested in the creative end of things, being able to write songs, improvise. And I've been less of the learn a bunch of songs kind of guitar player, sometimes embarrassingly so. I'm never the one, at a party that can pick up the guitar and play a bunch of songs by, whoever Coldplay or, but if we're going to improvise or make something up, that's my wheelhouse, So I've been interested in songwriting for a long time, and I started the way we met was I started a songwriting group on Facebook called SongSpark, which is was sort of based on an experience that I had after college. When I finished my undergrad, I audited at the university I went to. I audited an art class that was a sound and video course, and that class incorporated writing and recording music actually with GarageBand, and also doing other multimedia application. So we used iMovie and a couple other apps that I can't remember that weren't, Apple specific. And we did a multimedia show at the end, and the course itself was really cool and just gave me actually a lot of ideas that I still use when I teach, even though it's not directly related. And just a lot of things that I think kind of planted seeds, in what we do in SongSpark, what I've done in my own songs and approach to recording. And just the idea of putting on that multimedia show and working with other people who didn't all have a musical background. There were some musicians like me, there were artists, there were a couple people who just from the university who just wanted to take an art class. And so tying all these people together and putting on the show was a really unique experience. And so I think that kind of planted the seeds with what we do in SongSpark, where we have a monthly prompt. You have to, come up with, just based on this writing prompt, something brand new every month. And it keeps you to a deadline, so that you're creating something at least once a month. And I feel like if I hadn't been doing that, and if I didn't have the motivation from the other members of the group to keep me going, who knows what my output would have been. I know before that I wrote 3 songs in a year. Now I at least do 12 and usually more, so it's been a lot of fun, and it's been a treat hearing the stuff that you've come up with.
Oh, yeah. Thank you. And look, it has been an inspiration for me to actually be creating more music. And especially, I haven't done a great job the last few months, but over the last sort of 2 years that I've been involved with SongSpark, almost every month. So it's about 18 songs in 24 months and I've said, these are songs I wouldn't have produced without SongSpark being involved. So it is really, really cool. And like you say, having that positive, I call it positive time pressure. So you can say time pressure is a bad thing, but having positive time pressure to say, you need to get this done by this date. There's been many months where I'm like, if it wasn't for SongSpark, I wouldn't be doing this, because I would have just let it lapse and just let it continue on. So that's been really cool. So again, to be a music teacher and then spend your time helping others, motivate them with music in the after hours, it must be something that's pretty pivotal to your life. And so obviously that's really what got you into the recording, but what sort of started you off recording your own tracks and getting into recording your own music?
I think that so I dabbled in it a little bit before I took that class. and I think I was, gosh, I'm having trouble even remembering. I think I used Fruity Loops maybe, and I think I had like a pirated copy of Adobe Audition, and both were fine, but I didn't find them very easy to figure out, just basic things like how to enable recording and things that now I use GarageBand for everything. And just things that were what I found very difficult to figure out in those apps are done for you here. I'm not a gearhead by any means. And it's really only in the last year that I started, other than having a good guitar and a good amp, it's only in the last year that I started upgrading other things like my guitar pedals, some of my recording equipment. And for a long time, I really liked and still do really like the GarageBand. As long as you have, access to that app, it allows you to make a pretty decent quality recording with nothing. I have a friend who's in SongSpark who records he likes the limitations of recording everything only using his iPhone and his headphones.
Yeah.
He just uses the iPhone mic, and for a long time here, I have it here because I knew you were going to ask about gear at some point. This is like my best tool, the Blue Snowball. And it's great because although I do have an old M audio interface 2-channel interface that I use, for this you don't even need to have an interface. You can just plug directly into your MacBook, or you can buy whatever kind of adapter you need. I don't use iPhone or iPad, but I hear there's just like a camera kit adapter or something you use to just plug directly in. And I love the simplicity of it. You can plug in, get your idea down, move waveforms around, experiment. That's for me where the fun is. As soon as I have to figure out what cable to use or what thing I have to download or why this isn't working, I'm done.
It's such a good point, and we'll dive more into that and into how you record and what you use to record as well, because I know that's what a lot of folks will be interested in. And a shout out to the folks that are here live. So we've got Daniel here, we've got Woozle on board, Sunray's here, Jason Roberts here, Daniel's here. So we are recording this live. So if anyone has any questions that you want to put John under pressure in the spotlight and ask him all the tough questions, because I let's be honest, I'll softball him. I'll give him all these nice easy questions that he can hit out of the park. So I know that viewers here will ask the tough stuff, John. This
is when the conversation gets political.
The only politics we have around here are which DAW you use. That's the only bipartisan question here is are you Mac or PC? Are you GarageBand or Pro Tools? But so you mentioned using GarageBand, and clearly folks who on this channel know that my attitude is very much the same. And I think coming from a place where you've learned about music and composition of music and songwriting, the ability to have a tool that can quickly get your song ideas down without, like you say, having to work your way through the gear and the technology side. That's definitely one of the reasons that I use GarageBand. So so you use GarageBand on your Mac? That's your primary DAW, and do you use any other platforms as well to record?
I don't. I guess it's sort of been like a point of pride for me a little bit, but also just the fact that I'm a cheapskate, and don't want to, spend $2,000 on something. But the MacBook that I have is one that I bought third hand. When my school district and they had bought them used already, was phasing them out for pretty cheap, and then I got my my interface like in the early 2000s. So it's just been kind of nice that I've been able to do as much as I can with, $200 worth of equipment or whatever.
No, and it's so true. And I think I say a lot, and talking to a lot of creators as part of this series has been great to hear and to see, because the music that can be produced, it doesn't need the gear. Like, the gear is secondary. It's a good song, and I say it a bunch of times here, but a fantastic song recorded on some budget gear can sound fantastic. A terrible song recorded in $1 million studio is still a terrible song.
Well
you need to actually keep that in perspective as well. So in terms of what your experience, and by the way, we should actually mention here, there are links in the description. So if you are interested, if you're a songwriter and you're not part of the SongSpark collective, then you can check that out there. And Jason and John, who run the group, will be able to check your application if you do want to apply, and if you do want to join the fun there. Also check out John's music on SoundCloud. So we've got a link to your SoundCloud. And I did want to ask you this, because your artist name, the name you produce music under, Yolk of Egg. Tell us the story. There's got to be a story behind it.
I wish there was more of a story, but it was just my, you remember AOL AIM, Instant Messenger?
Oh, yeah.
That was my username on there. And I think I just came up with it in, 5 seconds. Just thought the idea of, well, a yoke is what's like a harness that you put on farm animals, right?
Yeah.
And just sort of like putting, play on words like yoke made of egg was kind of
Yep.
ridiculous and surreal sounding, kind of reminded me of like a Salvador Dali image or something.
Yeah.
I don't know. And I kind of like when I created the SoundCloud account, it was really just kind of randomly pulled something from my past, no real story there though.
It is funny how names evolve and how people, not to get too far off the track of music, but yeah, I think everyone, like, when I'll check someone else out and I'll get their SoundCloud link and they'll just have, they'll go, oh, I set it up 10 years ago. And it's just, again, whatever screen name they used or the username from World of Warcraft. And they're just like, oh, just
yeah, for sure.
So yeah.
Well, and then it just kind of, that just is your name. And, it's like, you can't think of it as being anything else at that point. And really, when you get down to it and you start to say like any band name, a lot of them are ridiculous.
Yeah, Red Hot Chili Peppers and Pearl Jam are like headlining tonight. You hear those without context and you're like,
yeah, for sure.
What now? Yeah, they sound really cool, like hardcore, right?
Yeah.
No, 100%. So again, we know that a lot of folks here like to hear. We talk that hardware is not that important, but obviously being a guitarist and recording music with that, what would be one of your favorite or some of your favorite tools or the hardware or the gear that you actually use to record and to get that yolk of egg sound?
Yeah. Okay. So I primarily just plug in direct, to the interface, plug my guitar into the interface and use the guitar, the amp modeling and all the built-in effects that GarageBand has. Although I do have, an amp and pedals and stuff, I don't often break them out. And it was really just in the last couple of songs that I'd started to do that and mess with miking my amp. I think, again, it just gets to like, as soon as I have to monkey around with equipment and move mics around and stuff, that's just my interest level is not there. And I'd rather just get the idea down. But I tend to do, a lot of guitar directly in, and then I'll double track some guitars. I try to get a little bit of a different EQ setting on each guitar and different, just tonal quality to each one to make it stand out. And my approach lately for the last year has been trying to avoid, I think a common thing that home recording people run into is overdoing the layering on the track. So I've been trying to, for the most part, keep it to like imagining what this would sound like played by a live band and try to stick to instrumentation that could be pulled off live. I'm not playing it live, but if I were, what would that sound like?
Yeah, and it's such an interesting thought because I think a lot of folks who are musicians, and it's weird, like I had this conversation during the week that folks using GarageBand tend to be musicians who tend to be music first, and we just want a way to capture our ideas and record music. Folks that are more into the gear and the engineering side tend to like having more gear and plugins and like more complex DAWs because they like that side of it.
Yeah.
And that's what they actually enjoy. So yeah, it's interesting what you say there. And I go back and forth between the whole, this has to be like a real band would play it. And yeah, but I can get this cool sound if I layer this guitar on the left and this on the right. And then I put like 4 backing harmonies, but you definitely can overdo that stuff. And I've been a victim of that in recent songs where I was like, doesn't need to strip it all the way back. And then it actually sounds twice as good as all these layers that are making it muddy.
Yeah. I mean, there you can find a lot of examples of, really ornate and layered music, really complex production that really heightens the song, but it's also really easy to destroy your song that way. So I'd prefer to just go the simple route at this point, where my thinking is.
Definitely. Love it. We have a question here, which is coming in from Bubba. This is an interesting one. So because given your background of learning and music education, do you ever use a pencil and staff paper to work out any voicing harmonies? It says, I do, probably since I'm old and was taught on paper. So yeah, when you're songwriting, when you're getting ideas down, do you use the old pen and paper? Do you use a staff and actually put your notes down, or how do you go about it?
So I use the phone voice memo to remember the guitar part or vocal melody. If it's a guitar part that's kind of different than something I would normally play that I think I would have trouble figuring out later, alternate tuning or whatever, I'll definitely write that down. And although I can read music, for that route, I usually just write out tab. I think it's a little easier to, figure out later. I do have a notebook, but that's primarily for, recording those guitar parts or lyrics. The lyric writing approach is, I think, what I use paper for the most. And I tend to do, a lot of scratch some ideas down as I rework phrases. I'll redo the entire line. So my notebook's kind of crazy looking, of a lot of lines that are scratched out, things that are highlighted, verses that are written 3 times. It's kind of nice to actually now that I have quite a lot of those songs, I can look back in the notebook and sort of see where I was 2 years ago, how I was approaching things, last year, how I was approaching things. And it's been kind of fun.
That it is cool. Like I'm very much a digital kind of guy, and I do spend a lot of time trying to automate processes, because I am a bit of a nerd, and I'm a bit of a tech junkie. So I don't tend to lean towards paper and pen, but when I do,
no,
I know, right? But when I do, it's actually pretty cool, because I found the notebook that I was using when I first joined SongSpark, and it actually had the very first song I did called "Drinking with You," which was December,
great song,
2 years ago. And I've got the notebook, and I was sitting on that couch, that blue couch, and I distinctly remember writing it in the notebook. And I think they're the sort of memories that you can look back on, that if it was just in a text file on my computer, I wouldn't have any of that context. And again, you've got the scribbled out bit where you go, no, drinking doesn't rhyme with winking. That's a really terrible rhyme. All of those sort of things. So, but no, great question from Bubba, and interesting to find out. And I wonder how many folks actually do write out notation these days. I must admit that I don't, and most of the people I talk with are either just writing down chords, or writing down tab, or writing down lyrics. I think notation seems to be going away in a lot of ways. So,
but I wonder if that's just for the people who come from the guitar world, because I think most of us are tab first kind of people. Even if the knowledge of reading music is there. I mean, it's just standard notation doesn't work real well for guitar. It's not, I don't think the best way to go about it. So maybe someone who's a piano player first would.
I think so. So there you go. I need to get a piano player on next interview, and we'll ask them about whether they use notation to write parts. So we've talked about the software, we've talked about the hardware. Are there any sort of, so you mentioned that you use the guitar amps in GarageBand. Any particular plugin or any particular processing that you tend to go to, that every song you say, hey, I use this one delay, this one reverb, this is my secret sauce for making yolk of egg sounds sound the way that they do?
You know what? I don't have like a standard thing that I do every song. I think for the guitar sound, it's more of like a way that I mix it. Lately, I've been doing one guitar pan left, one guitar pan hard right, and then like I said, I'll EQ so that they sound a little bit different. If one's a little more mid-range heavy, another one will be a little more treble heavy. As far as plugins, there's one that I like a lot that tends to make vocals a little more biting, but I think in a good way. It's called Saturation Knob by Softtube. It's I guess a distortion effect, but you can set it to be pretty subtle. And they say on their website that it brings out certain harmonics, and I don't know about that, but I think it makes the vocal sound cooler if you use it tastefully. And there's a guitar pedal that I use pretty often when I want to just have like a weird psychedelic kind of sound. And it's this, it's sort of a one-trick pony, but its one trick is awesome. It's by Dan Electro, and it's the Back Talk Backwards Delay. And that's, I think everyone should buy one. They're really fun to play with. You can't control it, like if you wanted to use it in a live performance setting, you can't, it does its one thing well. And that's makes this mind warping, sound where it sounds like the guitar is swallowing itself. But if you want a noise section, it's perfect.
That is so cool, because I was literally this week in a secondhand store looking at pedals and instruments and things, as I want to do, and I saw a backtrack, and I'm like, I have no idea what it is. It's cool. So now I'm going to be going back and seeing what the price of that was, and picking one up, because that sounds super cool.
I mean, Dan Electro pedals are kind of cheap to begin with, so I don't, even though that pedal is probably 15 years old, I don't think that it's highly coveted or anything. So get it if you can.
Like I said, I've seen it there a couple of times, so I don't think anyone else is interested. So maybe I'll go and throw a lowball offer and see how I go. Wish me luck.
Yeah, there you go.
But really good tip on the vocals, and it's something that I've learned a lot over the last few years, is that whenever someone comes to me and they ask me a question about vocals that are not cutting through the mix, or they don't have that edginess. So you think about the sort of songs, especially if you're writing rock songs or you want even singer-songwriter songs, it's that they are too clean, that they don't have any grit to them. And I think using something like an overdrive really subtly, or harmonic distortion or something, like, you don't think about that. You're like, I don't want to distort my vocals. I'm taught not to. I'm taught to keep things clean. But if you add just the right amount, it can really just add that colorized sound that is hard to put your finger on. But when it's there and it's present, especially if you've got electric guitars as well, it can just really bite and punch through the mix. So that's a great tip.
If you use it subtly, it's not going to sound like, nothing against, I like these artists, but it's not going to sound like Prodigy or the Strokes, right? I mean, you can use it in a different way that will add a little hint of something to the quality of the vocal. One thing that, speaking of vocals, and I'm by no means, like a trained singer or anything, but at work, I work with the music teacher there, who's a good classical vocalist. And she's been giving me a lot of tips lately. And one thing that I found really, really helps is to record vocals standing up. And I told her, because I practice singing in the car a lot, and she's saying that's the worst place you can sing because you can't breathe properly. And I feel like it's really made a big difference. And I wish I'd been doing that through, the whole time I've been recording.
It makes such a difference when you're standing up. And I don't know I'm not a trained singer either. I don't know the technical side, except that it seems to, you get a lot more air in your diaphragm. You can seem to, the mistake I hear home recording vocalists make, not to get it too far off track again, but it's a good point you raised, is that we tend to sing quietly in our quiet spaces when no one else is around, because most of us are kind of self-conscious, and you don't want to be there standing up and belting out this like epic vocal, and then your kid or your wife walks in and you're like, I'm not doing anything.
Nothing. And turn off the lights.
Exactly. I think that's my recommendation to people, is like, sing like nobody's watching, and just give it like 110%, and then you can always dial back. But what people don't realize is that the way that you talk and the way that you sing, when you record it and then you hear it back, the reason it's going to sound lifeless is that you're slouching in, you're sitting down, your diaphragm's all contracted. And if you stand up, and tip number 2, again, not to get off track again, but know your lyrics. That's the second tip that someone gave me that was a professional recordist. They're like, know your lyrics, because reading it off a sheet, you're not going to be able to emote the same way that if you can close your eyes and really just push the vocals out. So I've started doing those 2 things, standing up and knowing my lyrics. And I'm terrible at remembering my lyrics. That's been a huge challenge for me.
Oh, yeah. I feel you. Yeah, same here. I think being able to get the energy up is important, and I think that both of those things help with that.
Definitely. We'll go to the live folks here for some more questions. So this is a good question, seeing that you are in the music teaching game, and I'm sure you talk theory. What would you recommend for getting into music theory quickly and easily? So if someone says to you, I know nothing of music theory and I want to start learning about all the different things to help my songwriting, what would be your advice? What's the best way to get started?
I think it depends on what your threshold for being technical is. I think that the old school approach of learning, notes on the staff and plunking things out on a piano can really fill in a lot of holes, but not everyone has the patience for that, and if that's not something you're feeling really passionate about, I don't know that that's going to really be the best in for you. So I think, like, if that doesn't sound like your thing, going through a theory book with the piano in front of you, then I think learning some songs is a good start. And if you can find some YouTube instructional videos where the person breaks down the song and kind of explains what they're doing, I think that could be a real nice hands-on way of learning.
Absolutely. Yeah. And if you're not familiar with Rick Beato, who has a channel on YouTube, he is a very good music theory educator. Way over my head a lot. So be careful which one you watch. You can sometimes I leave feeling so insecure and like I'm a complete fraud because I don't know all of these cool, funky things that he knows. But yeah, take it one step at a time and in small doses. But and he has a series called What Makes This Song Great, which is really good because it compares the theory and the practical side. So he'll go through he'll play the song, and then he'll go through the theory of the chord progression and of the song structure and the melody and all different words that I don't understand about different modes and different sevenths and ninth chords. And he's like, the way they added that 13th to that chord. And I'm like, oh, okay. I thought they just went and it sounded cool. But good suggestions there. We've got a couple more questions here and we're running low on time. So let's jump in here. It's been great to have the folks here live asking additional additional questions and doing the hard work for me. So what is, if someone's starting out in home recording and someone's just getting started and they're like, John, I'm trying to do this thing, but I'm just not getting there. I'm not getting my songs recorded. What's your advice for someone to create, record, and get their songs finished that you would hand over?
Okay, so I don't know if this is exactly answering your question, but I'm a big believer in momentum, and that's why I think the SongSpark has been good for me and the other, regular users, because it gives you that deadline, gives you a reason to keep creating. One thing I've been doing pretty consistently for a while now is, since I don't have time every, weeknight after work to get the guitar in my hands, I've been trying to make a point of creating every weekend, every Saturday and every Sunday for some amount of time. I'm going to write something, guitar riff, come up with some kind of melody part, line of lyrics, something. And I feel like that momentum has really kept the creative juices flowing. So I don't know if that answers your question exactly, but I think finding a way to just do it and get something done is really important, because it's easy to kind of be crushed by just the overwhelming nature of, oh my gosh, I have to record this song. Where do I even start? Just get something done. Sling together a couple chords. If that's all you're able to do, then that's great. Do it.
Exactly. And I think, there's a risk of putting so much pressure on yourself that you're like, well, I'm not going to get it completely done, so I'm not going to do anything. And I think that's probably the worst option that you could go with. And I think your option is so much better to say, whatever time, if you got 5 minutes that you can play a couple of chords and like, okay, I've got a progression at C, G, A minor, C, and I'm going to just like start with that. Yep. Then the next day you can build on that and you can build on that. And so, I think that's good advice, to do something. If you don't know where to start, just start and see what happens. You don't always have to hit it out of the park every day. And if you're time poor, as many of us are, then just find those little windows of time and use them. Great advice. So what would be your proudest moment since you started creating music? So is there any particular time or particular event that you go, yep, that was when I just went, this is all worthwhile. This is definitely what I'm here to do.
So I think it makes me feel proud when, I hear members of SongSpark say things like, I wouldn't have written these songs if not for the group. And we have a master list that that's ongoing of all the songs that we're creating. We're just about to 300 songs. Yeah. And that's really cool. I mean, I remember in the early months when it was me and Jason Robert and Josh, Jude, some of our regular users, there were 10, 3 of us to start the group, and it was just close friends that knew each other in real life. And it's grown from there. And it's been really cool to see that list of songs go from 5 to 10 to 3, almost now 300. That's nice. And I'm excited to see where we can take it.
Absolutely. And I think that the beauty part of the group is, because again, I joined 2 years ago when, I was not one of the very early members, but there were probably only, 5 or 6 or 7 people releasing songs regularly each month. And now that's growing and growing. And it is still managed, the group has managed to keep a really good community feel. So I think that says a lot about those running the group, is if you can keep a group growing, but also keeping the right vibe and the right community focus in the group, then it's a really good thing. So if you are a Facebook user and a songwriter, you pretty much need to check it out, because it will change it. And I released an album in 2018, and I think 7 of the 11 tracks were SongSpark songs. So yes, I have the group to thank for even being able to release my album last year. So it definitely gave me the motivation to get songs finished. And that is the key, is to, when you have a deadline to finish them and you're sharing them with others. But I think more than that, without going into more detail, but getting feedback. And I say this a lot here, and I think the beauty of SongSpark is that it's 2 ways. So you're able to hear other people's songs and provide them with feedback on what they've created. And then in return, you get the reward of a lot of feedback. And I think everyone in the group is not afraid to give constructive feedback, because I think if everyone just said clap, clap, yay, fire, 100, great song every time, and gave you nothing, you're not going to improve and you're not going to be able to grow. Yeah. So that's what I've loved about the group as well, is the active environment where you're getting feedback on what's working, but also on what perhaps you could do differently.
Yeah. And I mean, all that's, any feedback you take with, a grain of salt, right? Because everyone hears things differently. But yeah, absolutely. I guess it's kind of humbling, it's like everyone's very positive, but it's also, it kind of gets you looking a little bit more critically at your own music, which I think is important, but not in a way where it's going to prevent you from, still trying and still growing.
Absolutely. No, very, very good. And probably a good point to finish on here. So I wanted to say a huge thank you to you for being here today, John. It's been a pleasure. We've been trying to coordinate this for a few months now, but busy schedules make things hard. But it's great to finally have a chat to you after knowing you virtually for a couple of years. And I think the folks that are here live, and if you're watching on the replay, hopefully you've got a lot of good tips and advice and an inspiration to get out there and start creating music. Any parting words or places where folks should go to check out some Yolk of Egg tunes?
Well, I have the SoundCloud account. Yeah, I mean, just listen to my most recent ones. I have all my old stuff up there too. For me, it's kind of fun to go back and listen because I can kind of hear how, I got better at recording, and singing and everything. I hear personal growth, but I don't know that anyone else is necessarily going to get as much enjoyment out of that as I am. But if you listen, thank you, Pete. Thanks for having me on. This is a lot of fun. If you let me keep going, I could blab about songwriting for another 2 hours. So this is awesome.
Absolutely, and I think we will definitely have to have you back in the future and do a bit of a special, because I know there's a lot of folks having some really good chats here live, and probably more questions that we've missed there as well. So yeah, please, if you've got any comments or questions we've missed, myself and I'm sure John will do the same. We'll jump down into the comments of this video afterwards and can keep the conversation going and chat with you down there. But thank you again for everyone who's live or watching on the replay, and for you, John, for your time today. Thanks for being here on the Creator Series, and we'll catch you all next time. Take care.
Adios.